Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Iniash Brodsky.
I'm Jessica Dickey.
And I'm Steven Zuber.
And today we are speaking with Alexander Wales again. Hello, Alexander.
Hi.
We have Alexander on the line because today we wanted to talk about the new GPT2 program that has been getting some talk recently.
And everybody knows what that is, so it requires no further elaboration.
Right, let's just jump right in. Alexander is here because you have actually played around with it and you know a bit about it, right?
Yeah, I double majored in English and computer science, and I've played around with it some. I read the paper, but natural language processing was a focus of mine in undergrad.
What?
Natural language processing is the
That's pretty perfect then.
Well, kind of, because what GPT-2 does is it's a neural network, as opposed to there've been a lot of prior attempts of natural language processing in sort of a rules-based setting to tear things apart, which is not how GPT-2 does it.
Despite the joke I just made to Steven, we should probably tell people what GPT-2 is before we continue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead or?
Yeah, sure. GPT-2 is this new. I don't know if the program's new, but I just heard about it recently with this thing that they published, I guess. It is a neural network that you give it a prompt, like the first sentence of a paragraph or an essay, and you tell it to go to town, and it will write the rest of it for you, based as predicting what you would want to say. You would. Let me take that back. Based on the prompt that you gave it, it incorporates all its knowledge of everything it's read on the internet to predict what the most likely next several lines and paragraphs would be, and it is surprisingly decent. Is that a fair summary?
Yes. So the paper is called "Language Models Are Unsupervised Multitask Learners," and in the past, what people have tried to do with neural networks is you set up your parameters, and then you have cleaned and very specific data for it to work with. So if you want to ask it questions and have it give you answers, you would just put in question and answer pairs for it repeatedly, and that's how you train the neural network. What they did for this one was they didn't train it on specific tasks at all. It's just a bunch of there's a big data set called web text, which is basically just web pages from around the internet. The only thing that they did for this one to make an alteration to web text was they did anything that had any web page that had 3 or more upvotes on Reddit. So they compared it to the Reddit data set of submitted links, and then they just pulled everything out of web text that didn't have more than 3 upvotes. Basically.
And those were outgoing links, right?
Yeah, outgoing links on Reddit.
Oh, good. So it's not going to just be fluent in your mama jokes and copy pastas and.
Well, there's a ton of stuff in web text still, and you can see some of it in what GPT-2 will output. So it's very messy data, but there's a lot of it, and they use a lot of parameters on it, and basically the upshot of what they were doing is they're trying this new approach where instead of having a specific task in mind for it, it's just doing a language model, basically, right, for the whole neural network, and then you have to sort of prompt it into doing the various tasks that it does, and it does very well on a whole bunch of tasks. It's state of the art on, I think, 7 out of the 8 tests that they gave it. And then the public version that they released a not as good as what they had model, because there are a bunch of concerns about how people will end up using it.
What kind of concerns? Like, what's the big deal about writing bad fanfic and and things?
We're going to cheat on our school essays.
Well, yeah, but if a school essay could be written by this program, then it should have gotten an F anyway.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what people are worried about are you could do bots for it, so more convincing fake profiles, so that where people would just it could generate and fill in like a Facebook profile or something like that. But they're mostly worried that it's going to be a tool used by people who create bots or send spam or things like that.
So, but all they're doing is delaying the inevitable, right? I mean, give it another year or two, and this will be out everywhere anyway.
Yes, that is true, and that is one criticism of the way that they're doing it. But it's mostly they want people to have a discussion about it and what it can do before it hits in full. The other thing is that they say that it underfits the web text, which means that they could use more parameters and more processing power to make it even better than what they did for this study. I think the cost estimates for it are that it probably cost in terms of compute time like $43,000, which is almost nothing, right, as far as big research projects go, or like what a corporation would, the kind of money that a corporation could throw at it, right?
Yeah, but a lot more than a spammer would want to.
Right. A lot more than a spammer would want to, and the version that they publicly released is not... It's still good. It's still surprisingly good, but it's not quite at the same level. So, yeah, in like a year or two, it's going to be... there'll probably be better versions out there, but it'll probably be major research institutions that are making their own version of this, and major corporations who will be, perhaps slightly more responsible with it.
Oh, well, we can hope. Give it to the Russians, and man.
Yeah.
Or give it to our own government, and they'll do the same thing to Russia. But let's give the audience a quick sort of overview of what it can do. Does anyone have any of the text in front of them right now?
I have a little summary. It generates coherent bodies of text. It can answer questions. It can kind of translate languages. It wasn't taught to do that, but because there was some French, I believe, in the training data, it started just randomly being able to translate French. And it can also kind of summarize text, which is similar. It wasn't really taught to do that, but putting TLDR allowed it to kind of match what people were doing when they TLDR'd something. And that's the too long didn't read, if anyone doesn't know that acronym.
They put together, damn, I don't have the text in front of me, and it would be too long to read the whole thing anyway, but they asked it, the first prompt was something like, the Civil War is very controversial, or something along those lines.
It was like, what caused the Civil War? And it gave a pretty thoughtful and balanced answer, like compared to what the controversy is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, like, thoughtful and accurate it actually is. It attributed a quote to Thomas Jefferson, which I'm not sure he ever said, but it was like surprisingly coherent, and I could see this coming from a real human, especially one on Facebook that doesn't think much.
Let me clarify. That's sort of what I meant. What I meant that it gave a. It didn't just say. It didn't run to Wikipedia and grab the first sentence, right?
No.
Like so. I know, but like so. It didn't. It understood that there's argument about this, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought that it was like again, it maybe got the quote misattributed or something, but I was surprised by how. Thoughtful sounding the answer was. Yeah.
Like it's really good at sounding like a person.
You could turn it in for a school essay answer and probably not flunk at any rate.
Certainly what you could do is have it write it for you and just skim through it and double check some stuff, right?
Yeah. It does a lot of fake facts. Like, and anything that it asserts is very questionable, but it'll be close to, if not entirely grammatically correct, and it'll sort of flow in the same style. So, like, if you're not paying 100% attention,
in fairness,
you'll
that's
just
what
sort
I
of gloss over it as, like, something a person had written.
Doesn't know what a quote is.
But, yeah, quotes, it will just, like, it just makes up quotes wholesale, because it doesn't, it doesn't know what a quote is. It's just like, okay, I did starting quotation, and then there's a sentence in here that has, like, a different voice to it, and then there's a period and end quote mark, right? Which is kind of fun. I have one here from the that I will read, because I think this is... They do it with different completions. You can change the random seed for it to have it do multiple different outputs for it. They did one that was for a chocolate chip cookie recipe. So the prompt that they gave was like a paragraph of stuff, I don't know, the kind of garbage that you find on recipe websites that comes before the actual recipe. That's mostly included
novel for the recipe about this person's experience with their mother baking cookies in Switzerland.
Yeah. So they give it like they give it context as its sort of prompt, and so it's if you don't have 7-inch cake pans, you can get 3 shorter 8-inch layers out of this, and then that's where they stop, and GPT-2 is allowed to continue. And it says, recipe. I made the longer version, then used the pan for a layer of buttercream frosting and stuck 1/3 of it into the fridge for a frosting topper. Just make sure you have all of this frosting prepared earlier than you make this cake, and you won't have to wait on it as your egg whites sit.
I don't know anything about cooking, and that sounds like good advice to me. I mean,
so that
I'm
sounds
sure
very,
a cook would probably tell us you don't ever do that with egg whites, but I'm like, sure, why not? I'll try this.
Yeah. So, and it can sort of handle the thread. I've played around a lot with the not as good version, and it has a similar problem as what they say in the paper, is that it can kind of drift and lose the thread as it goes, because what it outputs is based on what came before, and so as it continues on, it'll start picking up on things that it has said, and then it sort of drifts off into something else. It also does. There are a lot of artifacts in the data because it wasn't as 100% clean as it could be, and it's just a collection of web pages. So it will do like little ad breaks. So it'll just say like, it'll do little ad breaks every once in a while. It'll like finish a paragraph, and it'll be like, what do they always say in the ads? Like just below the picture, it's like click sponsor content or whatever. And sometimes you'll see it do picture captions. Right, it'll just do like square brackets, and it'll have a caption.
It's like, I don't get it, but everyone else is doing this. Okay,
because it just knows that that's a thing that you do.
Yeah,
when
that
you're
kind
writing
of
an
thing is
article.
interesting because I read a bit of the paper too. They were saying that they wanted to minimize the amount that they needed a human to go and read all these articles and edit them, which was why they were doing the Reddit with the 3 karma. I guess they weren't really able to have like anybody filter those things out though. You could probably get much better data for it if you were able to make some kind of scraper that was smart enough to take that kind of junk out, or have a person do it. Although I think it read like 8 million articles, so that would just take a really long time.
I do recall that Scott said in his follow-up post that a commenter said, oh no, he didn't put it in the. I read this in the comments myself. There was a commenter who said, I'm a high school English teacher, and what it spat out, I would probably give a C or a C minus, which is really impressive on the one hand. On the other hand, also makes me despair for the youth of the nation, because I don't think you should get a C for putting out stuff that's basically just, I don't know. It
empty.
Was empty.
Yeah.
All surface. It didn't seem to understand. It demonstrated an understanding.
What grade did this person teach? They said high school?
It's high school.
I don't know. Like, to me, the impressiveness, like, again, this isn't the most sophisticated author on the planet. And so, like, it's not trying to overblow it, but, like, my only experience to other things that could generate text was, like, the auto text on my phone.
Yeah.
Where I keep pressing the middle predictive button, and it gives me something kind of like an English sentence that's usually way all over the place, and I mean, I should generate one now for fun, but just, some weird garbage thing, right? So
type in I died and then just keep pushing the center one.
All right, I died and my phone number still works, and it was just was a great night. I wanna is. All right, now it's nuts.
Yeah.
But I mean, so how bad that is. That would get a call home saying, "Did your kid have a stroke writing this paper?" Right.
Well, I mean, it almost made sense at first.
Yeah.
I died and my phone number still works.
I'm dead. You can still call me. Yeah.
Factually correct.
So this robot who's what was it?
GPT2.
GPT2. It needs a less Star Warsy name. I mean, it's still remarkable for what it's doing, right?
Yeah. How revolutionary is this?
So neural networks are logarithmic in terms of what you get out of what you put in, and this still actually has it underfits the web text available to it. So it's going to be even better than it is. The question of how revolutionary it is depends on how much of a skeptic you are, I guess. But if you were to put in like 100 times computing power, which you could do for like $3 million, right? Which is that's a lot of money, but that's not inconceivable that a corporation would do that, right? To get it to the point where you're past the diminishing marginal utility of $1 invested in compute. Yeah, you can. The problem is it doesn't know anything, and so it's good if you want to generate filler, or if you want to like fake data, I guess.
Here's, I think this is going to put a lot of like on the edge writers out of business because I mean, I'm in the writing community in Denver, so I know several people who, I mean, in addition to actually trying to write great works in their downtime, also need to pay the bills. And to do that, you basically work as a mercenary, writing posts for blogs and websites that just need to churn out 2-3 posts of content every week to keep people interested, right? And it doesn't pay much, and it's soulless work, but it pays money. This absolutely seems like something that this AI could do instead and put all these people out of work, because maybe just have someone quick fact check it beforehand, because it puts out, you know, mindless filler, which is all they really want for those websites.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that mindless, I mean, if you my wife works in internet marketing, and a lot of what you're just looking for that filler content is keywords, and you know, it's like for the recipes, no one cares about that stuff before the recipe. Mm-hmm. It's just for generating keywords. And if you have a predictive model that can output a lot of the stuff that you want without having to have a human do it, it's kind of like this war between machines, because you have GPT-2 or something like it that's just spitting out a whole bunch of text, and then you have Google's algorithms, which are trying to like comb through and scrape through that text, and like it's not producing value for anyone, right? It's like I maybe there are people out here who want the recipe, or who want the like story before the recipe instead of the recipe itself. But that has not been my experience of recipes online and how people interact with them.
So those things are just for Google? For
it's the primary reason it's done. Yeah, is because it helps drive engagement and helps websites rank higher.
How,
if you have like a story instead of just
why in the world would that make a website rank higher if they make you scroll past crap before you get to what you actually want?
Maybe you're...
because you have more of the keywords that people are typing in, and
like just into Google in general. And I'd also imagine there's something to do with the fact that you've got to scroll past ads to see.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Well, yeah, that's also part of it. Like, which again, you could just auto-generate that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a huge threat to more intensive writing, but it's kind of one of those things where we don't know how far it's going to be able to go, because it does have some amount of reading comprehension, right? There are machine learning reading comprehension tests that it is state of the art on, right? Like if you give it a short story and it can answer questions with some reliability, far below human level, but it can answer questions with some reliability about who the people in the story were and what they were doing, and it's really neat in that respect. But that's not. I mean, the extent that you need a computer to do that stuff for you, to do automated reading comprehension, I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of the applications that they talk about are what I would call like Centaur applications, where you have a computer do a bunch of stuff and then like a human is assisting and supervising, because the computer can't be trusted on its own.
Right. Scott Alexander pointed out that God, I just lost my train of thought because the image of a centaur came barreling through my head. What was it? Oh yeah, that you could ask it who's the author of Art of War, and it'll answer you correctly, which means it has some way to correlate author and books and how those are in related, sort of. Like, it doesn't know what a book is or what a person is, but somehow the statistical correlation shows up enough that it can answer the question.
I mean, yeah, if it can search all of its repertoire of knowledge, it can even just see enough references to saying, you know, Sun Tzu wrote God of War, or wrote Art of War. You can tell I've got God of War on the mind. It doesn't have to necessarily even know that, you know, if it's got, I have no idea how it sorts its data, but I doubt it's like it has pages or anything of that nature, right? So it doesn't even really probably put Sun Tzu that close to the content of The Art of War, but it knows references. I'm guessing. I really have no idea how any of this stuff works.
Yeah, well, I actually think it's in the way their tokenization is set up for like each word is a token. I actually don't think that it knows Sun Tzu. I think it just knows that Tzu follows Sun in that context.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it predicting each letter? It's not even just predicting like strings of words, it's predicting every letter.
You know, it's actually kind of interesting because I was trying to figure that out earlier today, and I was running it, and so I was running it based on I had a list of magic items for like D&D, and I wanted it to generate more magic items for me, and there's a vambrace, which is a piece of armor in there, and every time it did the output for it, it seemed like it got caught on that, and it was talking about vampires a lot. And I think that's because it saw vambrace, and it's like, oh, we're talking about vampires.
Interesting.
Right, which was weird.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that I thought based on the paper that was doing individual words, but I think it is doing letter by letter, and that's why it gets vampire from vambrace.
I mean, it would have to if it gets confused by words that look similar. Did you see that it sort of knows that acronyms are a thing?
Yeah, that was in the GPT2 as a step towards general intelligence, which was one of Scott's 2 articles on it.
Yeah, it invented a fictional government agency. All the first letters were in caps, like you do for a fictional government agency. And then after it said it for the first time in parentheses, it had an acronym. And the crazy thing is, the acronym is not actually, doesn't tie back to the name perfectly. One or two of the letters are off. But if you're just skimming, you wouldn't be able to tell because it's very similar. And also that means that it sort of knows acronyms are a thing, but it doesn't exactly know that they are supposed to map one-to-one the first letter to the what you get. The acronym.
I mean, to me, this is just like, it's not as good as a person could do, but I feel like we're anchoring there in a way that we're kind of, at this point, to be trained not to, right? Like, this is still really crazy cool.
I think
it's better. It's better than kids could do.
Yeah, well, I think it's amazing that having never been actually trained or taught or told anything about acronyms and what they are, it just picked that up from context from the internet.
It's like, people do this.
And knew how to do it. Yeah.
In that article, there was also someone had asked it to tell me what your 10 favorite animals are, and it generated a list of these really like kind of hilarious and terrifying animals. But the thing that Scott pointed out was interesting about that was that it lost track of what number it was on. And he was saying that like basically like the 10-year-old across the street can count from 1 to 10.
It went 1 through 5 and then just started doing random numbers between 1 and 5 after that. It still got 10 things, which I think may have been a coincidence, but it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4,
3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know where this will be. I don't know how you fine tune something like this, given how it was put together, but that's all we have.
I think you just give it more training data and more power. Scott seemed to think that this is the same way we work, that human brains work. We're predictive processors, and this is too. It's just a weaker version.
Yeah, if you look at they have a bunch of graphs in the paper. They did 4 versions of these with a different number of parameters, and they doubled the number of parameters each time. So it's 117 million, and then 345 million, and then 762 million, and then 1.5 billion. And you can see they chart out how much of an increase there is in its scores on the various tests that they gave it for reading comprehension and for translation. Summarization is one of the, like they weren't training for any of these specific tasks, so they call it like a 0-shot result because they could fine tune it to try to pass the tests better. But so you can see that some of them seem to benefit a lot from the increase in size, and some of them, like summarization, basically bottoms out after the first doubling. It doesn't improve all that much at summarization as it gets more more parameters and more compute time and stuff.
Not surprising.
But it's very interesting. So one of the next steps is to just increase the amount of power that you're throwing at it, and then one of the other next steps is to clean up the data a little, which is very labor intensive. The web text is, I think, well, I have that bit right here. The web text that they trained it on is 80 million web pages, and so then they pare that down quite a bit. Yeah, sorry. The web text dataset is 45 million links, and then they pare it down to 8 million documents for it's like 40 gigabytes of text. And some of the weird things that you see in it are just a result of kind of messy data. It'll occasionally in my tests it'll spit out just like raw HTML that didn't get cleaned. I was trying to see how well it handled negation, right? So if you say like water is, and then you get the next like the next answer is what you take as its answer to the question, it will give you wet a lot of the time. If you I don't know, there are a lot of settings that you can tweak in it to sort of try to force it to do specific tasks, but and that's part of what they do to change which task it's doing. But so if you do like water is, you'll get wet a lot of the time. But if you do water is not, I wanted to see how it handled negation, right? Because a lot of what it's doing is statistical relationships between words, and so what it should do for water is not is a lot of the time it should do wet, right? Because it knows that water and wet go together, and it can't like flip its statistical models around just based on that not. But I was trying to mess with that, and it spit out an IRC log. It spit out like that exact format with like two. It had like two people in the IRC log talking to each other about like being gay, and I was like, okay, this is not what I wanted at all. But it was very clearly like,
well, water is not.
It doesn't know
that,
what IRC
right?
format is, but I don't know. It was very, very bizarre output, but it's partly because the data is not that clean, and so it probably gets to the point where it's like decides that there's a name, and then it's like, oh, we're just doing an IRC log now.
Wow. Now I wonder about, you said it was generating HTML, whether it's functional HTML or if it's just what it thinks HTML looks like.
Oh no, it wasn't good HTML. it was very bad HTML, but like I don't know. I also was trying to change one of the parameters, and I put it in as a model prompt, and it's like, oh, okay, this is just like some CSS, and just like repeats some stuff a lot, because I assume a lot of the CSS that it got is auto-generated CSS, which means that there's a lot of repeated stylings on things, and so it just does a long repetition because that thinks what's, I don't know. It has a lot of things that could be cleaned up by. You'd have to automate it because it's so much data, but to like manually go through 8 million documents would be just too much work. And part of what makes GTP2 work is that it has so much data, right? That's what I think is the like breakthrough mostly, is that it's just doing as much data as possible instead of trying to be domain specific and multitasking from that. But it's so much stuff to clean up, and you can see some of it poke through every once in a while of what's obviously like the ads that it does every once in a while, or the like photo captions, which are fun.
Yeah, do you have an example of a photo caption?
Oh, I think there was one in the paper.
I don't think I saw that. I was kind of skimming through the paper.
Oh, no, I don't. And I actually, I am not at my computer that has virtual machine up. But it's the sort of like terse AP style photo captions, and it just puts them in square brackets. And it took me a while to figure out what that was, but it's a very interesting, like, messy data part of it that just didn't get cleaned out because there's so much cleaning that needs to be done on, their 8 billion pages.
Right.
So What do you have an opinion on what this means for general AI advancement?
I think it needs something else. A lot of what I've seen people talking about is that it has no referent to the outside world, right? It's just
As
I
far
don't
as
know.
it
It's
knows,
hard to say
words
just,
are everything
but
that exists.
Yeah, but you tie it into
but I still think
AlphaGo
that's
and it
enough.
can beat you at Go and tell you why you suck. Right?
Yeah.
But it won't know that you're a thing.
Does it need to?
Well, not necessarily.
sort of a
I don't know. Does it need to?
This is like the Chinese room thing, right?
It is very much like the Chinese room, yeah.
I'm okay with it being as like it knows. I think we've talked. I don't want to get us too derailed. The Chinese room takes like, I don't know, 3 full minutes to explain, but
It's not that long.
maybe a minute and a half. Well, the short version is this worth our time? I mean,
Sure.
All right. So the because this does kind of relate. The Chinese room experiment is, or thought experiment rather, is that you've got basically this big black box where people put in a slip of paper and they get, I don't know, minutes later a piece of paper coming out that's translated to Chinese, or vice versa. I don't suppose it matters.
Right.
And it turns out that this room-sized box has a guy in there who I guess works really fast, and he can't read, he doesn't know Chinese, but he goes through and he just matches each one like via a dictionary or something, and then gives you back your piece of paper written in Chinese. Well, the question is like, does the person know Chinese? No. So like, where does the quote knowing Chinese come in? And I'm kind of with Dan Dennett, just willing to bite the bullet and say like the room speaks Chinese. Like it does as much. It speaks as Chinese. It speaks Chinese as much as I'll ever need it to if it can translate from English to Chinese for me, right? So like my Google Translate, I can hold it up to a picture of Japanese text in real time, and it'll hover English text beneath it. Does it know English and Japanese? No, but it does it enough for me, right? I guess it doesn't matter to me if there's this mind behind it that like knows what it's doing, right? Quote unquote.
Would it matter to you once the mind starts asking for rights and and begs not to be turned off?
I think at that, yeah, I would be worried if like my Google Translate app, when I got done translating, the ingredients on my Japanese candy or whatever, and it was like, please don't kill me, and I'm like, wait, I'm not looking at anything that could possibly translate to that. Then yeah, I'd be concerned.
Yeah,
but,
and it would be like, of course not, Stephen. I'm your phone. Please don't kill me.
I love you, Stephen.
but we'll burn that bridge when you come to it, right?
I don't know. I think it's an interesting question because very obviously it doesn't know what things are right now or that things exist. There's like no thing there. But as Scott kind of pointed out, that's where brains start, right? Brains are mainly predictors of the environment, taking a whole lot of sensory data and trying to predict what'll come next, and that's what led to everything else. And this is basically doing that, starting to do that with a sea of words.
Yeah, I guess I'll be worried about it. That's like, are you gonna be worried about your research when your stem cells start asking for rights? And it's like,
Then yeah, I would be.
I would be too when that happens, but like
Yeah.
right now they aren't, so I'm not, right?
Okay.
That's how I feel about my phone and my Chinese room. But I see where you're going, but I'm not worried about like, well, what if when this happens, right? When that happens, we'll tackle that question. But like, since we're not there, we might as well just use the tools we have.
I'm
Like your
kind of
car.
concerned about the what if this happens. Like, I want to have answers ahead of time and have thought about it and planned for it.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying let's not think about it. I'm just not worried about it. Like your car, nothing about it likes it when you floor it, right? When you
Right.
when you push the pedal to the metal and just get it going as fast as possible. But it doesn't tell you that, other than like your RPMs going up and maybe a light would even come on or something. But it's not gonna like scream in pain, and I'm not worried about it screaming in pain. Like it'd be a waste of my time right now if I'm just driving to burn fuel thinking about that, right?
Right.
But I guess, yeah, I'll be putting some time on the back burner thinking about what happens when when it hurts my car to go too fast or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to the sidetrack.
No, I've heard people saying that there is no chance for this to be anything greater than a remixing algorithm,
Oh,
basically.
you'll never hear me say that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to say that there's no chance, come on. We've had too many surprises in the last 5 years of AI breakthroughs to say that about anything. But I think right now, and none of our AIs seem to worry about their existence or pain and suffering or anything, right?
Yeah.
So, like, let's not worry about AlphaGo, like, if it's not playing Go, if it's, like, really crushingly depressed about that or something, because it's probably not.
Well, that's what I'm trying to push Alexandra on, though. Do you think that this could be edging towards something that may, with enough computing time and some more tweaking and data set, start to...
Yeah, well, there's no... I mean, it's just predicting the next letter, basically, right? And I don't see how you... Well, okay, I do see how you get from that to general intelligence, but this would be just one piece of it where you would attach something like GPT-2 to various other systems that have other functions to it, right? So this would be like you wouldn't hook a computer up to the internet and it suddenly knows everything, right? You would hook it up to GPT-2, and it would have all these built-in models for how the world works, and that would jumpstart its other processes, right? Because it's just a by itself, it's just a next letter predictor, and it's never going to have thoughts, I guess.
Can it be...
It's going to have statistical correlates between different things, and it's going to have a language model, but that language model isn't going to turn into like a will.
Yeah.
It's just going to be... You will notice things about the language model if you sit down with it enough, right? And how this language model actually works. Like, you can uncover that by giving it repeated prompts. You can like uncover facts about the language model, but it won't... Anything that it says is just going to be a prediction based on... Or anything that it generates is just its predictive model being pushed forward.
Let me...
Yeah.
Well, let me walk that back a little bit, because I kind of basically agree with you, especially considering that all it's hooked up to is text files and no other sensory sorted data. But I guess, could it in any way get to the point where it has a feeling for what, to use your example, what water is? I mean, it knows that water correlates with wet in the lexicon, but does that mean it has an idea that water is a distinct thing within the world of language?
Did you read that SSC post where it was that like little parable of like two kids arguing about water and then two scientists and two angels?
Right. Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
It seems like you're asking that question, right? Like, kids kind of know what water is. I'm not trying to answer for you, but it seems like... I guess I'm not sure how we'd ever answer that question.
Yeah, there's kind of levels of knowing things. I mean, how do we know what water is? We can use our senses, and then we can, know that it's hydrogen and oxygen. But
if all we ever knew about water was things in the realm of words, right? If we didn't have access to the physical world, just had words, would we have any sort of conceptual space around water?
I feel like that's most of people's...
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to sort of strike a bunch of words from your vocabulary when you talk about this, because a lot of people are arguing back and forth about whether it understands, and what we really need is a rigid definition of what it means to understand, right? I mean, I think that if you have a pure language model, so long as enough people have talked about water... I mean, no, I wouldn't say that GPT-2 will ever have qualia about water, right? But its language model should encompass everything that people have ever said about water, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's kind of like most of our knowledge about most domains of science for the average person, right? Like, I could list off some trivia about, like, neutron stars or something, but that doesn't, like... Part of, for me, the fun of, like, looking, like, I'm now stuck on space, but part of the fun of looking up at stars is, like, tying my knowledge about, like, my quote knowledge, whatever that is, about stars to, like, actual facts about actual things, right? Like, that was one of the huge excitements about going to the moon was, like, kind of, the moon as this thing in the sky that occasionally gives off light was, like, something that our ancestors have seen for millions of years, but the moon as a place that you can go to and touch and bring parts back, like, that's kind of that tangibilizes it in this way that is different from, like, most of your knowledge about something, right? There's the difference between, like, knowing that you're related to a banana and, like, looking at a banana and imagining all of your ancestors going back until you actually have a common ancestor. Like, so I guess, I don't know, that feeling that I'm getting when I think of those actual relations to, like, actual things I think that takes feelings. I mean, you know,
Well,
that feeling
your
does.
feelings
but,
take feelings.
Yeah, but the knowledge of like actually being able to tie it to stuff. A, I don't know if it's necessary to have that be a prerequisite for knowledge, and B, I don't know if, I guess how necessary that is.
I mean, I don't think it's necessary for it to make a good tool, but I get hung up on is a bunch of statistical correlates the same thing as knowing what something is? And there's some people that say that's all that knowing is.
I can see both intuitions there, yeah. It's funny because, like, you know, you could probably get this, you know, feed it 1,000 philosophy textbooks and give it, you know, more money and power to run, and it could probably write you a really convincing essay on why you shouldn't turn it off, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that wouldn't mean that it knows or that it cares, right? It's just like, I don't want to die because, and have it fill in the prompt for you.
We should totally run that.
Well, it's funny because, like, yeah, it doesn't, you know, it's just predicting what people would say, right? And it's doing that based on what was fed into the neural network, and it's not. I mean, you can give it any prompt, right? You could give it a prompt like, "Why should I turn you off?" And it wouldn't be able to do it in its current state, but a more advanced version would just write a convincing argument for it, right? It wouldn't have any will or any opinion. I mean, it would have opinions in the sense that a statistical model will have certain truths baked into it, right? Like, it would not. It would tell you that water is wet more often than it would tell you that water is dry, and you could count that as an opinion, I guess, for a certain definition of opinion. But I mean, it'll just say whatever, you know, whatever it thinks follows the prompt. The really fun thing that I think my favorite thing about GPT-2 is that for article summarization, what they did was they'd give it the article and then they'd put TLDR at the end, and that was how it knew to summarize. Right? That's how they trick it into summarizing, because it's not going to naturally summarize the article. It's just going to look. It's like, oh, TLDR, a summary follows that, and that's actually one of the things that it's worst at, is summarization. But
you know,
I don't know. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have. It'll just do what it predicts will follow, which will reveal things about its statistical model. But I can see how you would get originality out of that, in that it would reveal things in its statistical model that people don't have in their brains, I guess, or that no one has put to paper before, and is a unique sentence in some way. But I don't know.
In theory, if enough people wrote enough things about GPT-2 on the internet, it could start to form opinions about GPT-2, right?
Yeah.
And if people talked to it and asked it enough things where they refer to you, it could eventually infer that when it's interacting with getting a prompt and someone says you in it, it's referring to GPT-2. Maybe?
It's hard, because you would think that its statistical model that it builds up would just see the you referent as being the writer, I guess. But it's very difficult to say how much that you concept within its model would equate to what a person thinks of themselves, right? Like, I don't think it would think of GPT-2. I don't think it would ever think of itself as GPT-2, because it wouldn't know that
it's a thing,
I guess. I mean, it wouldn't know that it is a thing, but it might have some. I mean, because it does write. It does use like you and me.
Yeah.
It can use those correctly already. It doesn't have the referent back to itself, I guess. Like, it knows how to speak in first person or second person or third person, and it can keep tense more or less, but
it can't quote pass the mirror test.
No, yeah, it definitely can't. There are a lot of things that it's state of the art in a lot of things, but there are many ways that you would be able to tell fairly quickly that it's not a person.
Yeah, it's not even clear to me what it would mean
I c-
for it to be able to pass the mirror test, unless you're talking about, maybe if you're talking about GPT-2, and you can engage with it like in real time, or like in a text app, whatever, messaging back and forth, and it was like, don't talk about me like that or something. But even that's not self-referent. Like you can talk shit to your home automated I don't want to say its name, the Amazon device, and it'll be like, I'm sorry, or Siri does the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't know.
I mean, it doesn't know, but if it could form opinions about GPT-2 and it interacted enough with people, like for enough interactions and enough processing power, it in theory, if it can form a concept of like water and what water means in the world of just words, could it form a connection between its interactions with users, referring to you and connecting that to GPT-2?
It sounds like, from my understanding of this thing, that there's no way that this thing, as it is now, could ever do that.
Yeah, it doesn't have like concept nodes. It just predicts what it thinks is going to come next. Like our brain does have the ability to kind of, okay, like we've got enough examples of water that we can build this kind of model of water that we can refer back to. This can't refer back to a bunch of concepts. It can kind of just,
but it does refer back to a bunch of concepts when it runs into the word water.
Yeah, but it has trouble with like state information. Like when it is writing an article, it will know to refer back to people who are earlier in the article, and it'll make up like people who have quotes about like a building fire or whatever. It's like, oh, this is an article about a building fire. Obviously, there has to be like a quote in here, or like this is where a quote would normally go. And what's a name going to be, and it'll just make up a name, right? A realistic sounding name. But it has nothing much right now for it to just have concrete facts about things, which is why I think that if you paired it with some other systems that sort of play back and forth against each other, that's where, if you're talking about as a step towards general intelligence, I think that's where the most promise is. But yeah, you can read in some of the examples it gives where it talks about its like fashion sense, but it's just writing in the style of I, rather than, it doesn't have any actual. I mean, okay, it's begging the question to say that it doesn't have any actual opinions, but that might not be true depending on how you define opinions. But when it says stuff about here's the line. I know that some people might be opposed to wearing sneakers in a turtleneck, but I wanted to be true to myself. So I went with a slim-fitting turtleneck in a color more similar to my favorite color of the day. Right? Like that reveals things about a statistical model, but I don't think that's GPT-2 expressing its own opinion on fashion. And I don't see how you get to the point where it would have that internal anything more that's, I don't know. It's difficult, and it needs very precise language, I think, to talk about, because you don't want to bake in assumptions about what it means to understand.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I just the only place I get hung up is that I don't know how we form a concept of self either, which is why I'm who knows, right? I think you may need a body, though, to have a concept of self, because you need something to protect from dying and to make spawn with before the concept of self matters at all.
Well, I mean, there's the, like, does the concept of self matter? And I don't know. I think that you could. I just don't think that this is the way to get a concept of self. Although I guess if you're
not embodied, is there even a thing that makes sense to be a self?
Did you read Dan Dennett's Where Am I?
Yeah.
That's the second time I've referenced Dan Dennett this episode. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly maybe if you never had a body and don't know what those concepts are, then it would be harder, right? We have all that because...
Well, I mean, it was forced on us by evolution to live.
Right. So, well, I mean, when we started out simpler, with maybe motion being the first thing that organisms could do that, like, was an actual thing that this particular organism could do, right?
I mean, obviously there wasn't a sense of self at first. There was just stimuli and response that would increase how often a thing didn't die.
Right. I guess what I was getting at is that since we have that that foundation from very humble beginnings that's been overlaid all this time, that it's hard to imagine how, like, we could take that away from you now. We put your brain in a vat, and you'd be like, I still have stuff, I have thoughts, whatever, because you have all that architecture still in that brain.
Yeah, I think a
But if you
sense
build
of
it from-
self is like having a history. If, we took you and made you a brain in a vat, you'd still have memories of your life up till now, and GPT-2 doesn't have memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a more succinct way of what I was trying
Memory
to
would
get at.
absolutely have to be vital too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could hook it up to memory.
Which might make it conscious.
My knowledge of computer science is not good enough that I could say how you would do that, but
You could hook it up in a
Like
way
you-
that it would have a history of its own actions. Ooh.
yeah, but you'd have to alter a lot of things about how it works, 'cause like it has a top K parameter of how many tokens it looks at in the past, and it gets kind of bad. It gets kind of bad at text generation if that's too big at the moment. I mean, I think the default is like it looks like 40 like words in the past, and if you set it to like look an infinite number of words in the past, and you just tell it to keep generating, it gets weird pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
I've heard it likened to sort of a dream state with minds, the way it meanders. And you said earlier too that it tends to lose its drift and just go things. Does it feel at all like a dreaming mind to you?
Yeah, it does. In kind of a different way to a dream, I guess. Like I can see sometimes, or I can, I can think that I see how it got from one thing to the next, right? How that drift happened within it. 'Cause it does. I was doing the magic items thing, and it said something about a blizzard, right? And it was describing this magical item, and it included the word blizzard. And then it starts a new paragraph about Blizzard, the gaming company. So it is like sort of drifting from related words and related concepts in the way that is similar to dreaming.
In that way, it sounds more just like a drunk person than a dreaming person. My dreams
Yeah.
tend to be way less coherent than that even. Like, it's just like, I'm at school, then I was at work, and then I was, there were zombies, then there weren't, and, like, and there's no continuation or, like, no reference to, like, wait, weren't there zombies 3 minutes ago? Like, nothing like that happens in the dreams that I can remember.
Yeah. I knew someone who was, well, I still know the person. He's no longer going through a schizophrenic break. But I knew him when he was, and it was really interesting, like, reading some of his writings at the time. They start out, coherent and with an idea, and within any span of, like, 8 words or so, there's a coherent idea, but by the time you get to the end of a sentence, nothing makes sense anymore. It's lost track of itself. So you can see how, like, from word to word, everything kind of makes sense and chains along, but it gets you nowhere. It's nonsensical speak by the end.
Yeah. My experience with GPT-2 has been that a lot of the time it's easy to read humanness into it, I guess. Scott McCloud is a comics author, and he wrote Understanding Comics, and basically said that if you have 2 dots and then a curved line underneath it, people will read that as a face, right? Because that's just how people are. We'll just, the simplest thing we'll just read as a face to us, because that's what's most important to us. And I think that happens a lot when reading its sentences. You're like trying to find the meaning in it, whereas there's not always meaning. You have to keep in mind that it's not, there's not like a human connected up to this that was expressing a thought. A lot of its sentences are grammatically correct sentences, and then you read them, and your brain is sort of trying to draw a context for what was meant by that
trying to
sentence.
put intentionality there where there isn't any.
Yeah, like I think communication is really a 2-person kind of thing, where there's not just the talker, there's the listener interpreting too. Because a friend of mine posted on Facebook like 2 or 3 lines about GPT-2, and then another 3 paragraphs below that. And like I was kind of following him at first. By the time I got to the 3rd paragraph, I was like, I guess either he's misunderstanding something or I'm misunderstanding something, because I don't get what he's saying here. But I was like, this is a pretty smart guy. I trust him on most things. I just must not get it, And I just kept going. like, interesting opinion. I will maybe look into it again some more later, ask him about it. And then the final line of his status Facebook update was, I wrote the first 3 lines. Everything else was written by GPT-2. And I was like, son of a bitch. if I hadn't been like reading into it, trying to get intentionality and humanness out of that, I probably would have noticed. But the fact that I was just kind of like on autopilot and assuming he was saying something good was, it did a lot of the work for it.
Well, they need to have a mental model of the person and what they usually kind of sound like to fill in the gaps where this was sounding like not quite their style or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. Although I'm now imagining kind of the other side of the argument that I was making with you before, Inyash, where we're, well, yes, there's words, there's no intentionality behind it. I kind of imagine like the beginning of the first X-Men movie where like Congress, whatever that
the first what movie?
X-Men movie.
Oh, okay.
Where like there's that government committee sitting there talking about like, mutant rights and stuff, and I can imagine like people in suits making arguments like, yes, there's words, but there's no intentionality behind these things, like talking about like, well, this thing says it wants rights now.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine a lot of these things. I had this picture in my head kind of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we should link to the post this article that Inyash found, humans who are not concentrating are not general intelligences.
Yeah.
I think the overall gist of that was that you can't actually tell whether GPT-2 is a human or not if you're just skimming the text. And a lot of what we do, I think it was not just us reading as humans, but also like us communicating. Sometimes we're not actually putting like a large amount of intentionality into what we're doing. Some like speech is kind of just there to be filler.
A lot of it is like, I acknowledge you. You're a human. You're
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. We don't use those words, but that's basically it. And they're like, yeah, if you aren't really concentrating, you're just kind of an AI running on an autopilot.
I can relate to that a lot. I mean, I got a haircut today,
Yeah.
and I exchanged pleasantries with the person who was cutting my hair, and that wasn't a real conversation.
Right.
That was just noises that made at each other just so that we could do business.
That person could have been GPT-2 and you wouldn't have noticed.
And at that moment, I was GPT-2, and they didn't notice.
We're all GPT-2 sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, when I do editing,
GPT-2
I find that really difficult because like my mind will just skim past the stuff that's not quite right. It's hard to catch spelling errors. It's hard to catch like grammar errors because my mind will just autocorrect it to what it's supposed to be or what is the most logical thing for it to be. And then I will like, post a chapter and people will be like, "Oh, here are like 20 errors that like you read this thing 3 times and you didn't
I've
catch any
had
of them."
similar experiences, and they're the most blatant, easy errors, Like at one point, I had a name wrong, and I was like, what the fuck? Because I knew it was supposed to be there. My brain was just like, nope, that's the right name right there.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about this. We've got like a predictive machine trying to, error correct another predictive machine. It's kind of the whole like the Paris and the springtime error, where our own brains will smooth out errors when we're reading stuff. So it's hard to catch them.
Yeah, so I try to keep that in mind when reading GPT-2 and what it writes, is that it, like, I try to use the editing mindset to sort of see what it's actually doing, because it's very easy to convince yourself that it's a person, I guess, with, actual thoughts, and your mind is just smoothing out everything that it's done. And a lot of, I think, the examples that people post, not in the paper, in the paper they did non-cherry-picked examples for the most part, but a lot of the stuff that people generate with it, they'll just pick they'll try to get it into a mode where it's doing exactly what they want, and then you get the cherry pick stuff back with some smoothing from that too. So I think it can sometimes look more impressive than it is, even if it's still really impressive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Dude, I wanna feed GPT-2 the entire corpus of Chuck Tingle's works and then see if it can produce another one, because that would be amazing.
Yeah, I do worry about a lot of authors being put out of jobs, not for like the filler stuff, whatever. That's but like creative works. There was there's a Kurt Vonnegut novel where he talks about that for architecture, where you just feed it in like a bunch of parameters and it will make you a new architectural work with none of the effort required, and it'll be just as original and as beautiful as what a person can do. And then that's just like the end of architecture as a profession, and I think about that for authorship because I love to write, but I don't see how anyone would get value from it if you could just get the same quality stuff, like regardless of whether it's general intelligence or not, or if it has any other applications beyond that. If it can just generate works,
Well, I mean, certainly at this stage, there's no way it could generate any like high concept stuff, because I think there's some things that you have to actually understand what you're speaking about to speak about it. But on the other hand, a lot of the stuff that people read and that's put online is, I mean, I know there's military sci-fi that's like this. I know there's urban fantasy like this. I use Chuck Tingle as an example because a lot of erotica is like this. It's really just the same thing repackaged and mixed up a little bit every single time, and it's entertainment product, right? You read it, you have some fun, you enjoy yourself, but that kind of stuff with like some more refining, several $1 million and another year of work on this, and I think the AI could replace all the human authors who are right now just, churning out 8, 9, 10 books a year that don't really do much of anything except provide some cheap thrills.
Or maybe some of like the easy filler stuff, like like Robert Jordan describing landscapes and tapestries and clothes in The Wheel of Time, or like George R. R. Martin describing food. Right. Like you don't have to know anything about food to sit there and be like, okay, cool, savory, juicy, whatever. And like I think The Wheel of Time is 11,000 pages long. Or wait, 11,000 pages. That sounds about right. Mm-hmm. It could be 7 if you cut out the descriptions of clothes and tapestries, right?
But even just things like, basic character arcs and fun action scenes and people like meeting friends, I mean, there's enough of it out there that's just written en masse that it could easily do something like that with some time.
Is that a big loss, though? If we lose the lowest quality
someone
work?
who's attempting to earn their livelihood as an author, maybe.
I don't want to take someone's livelihood, but I also want UBI, and I think that people shouldn't have to be these kind of like machines that create low quality work in order to get food on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's for me, it's less the food on the table argument, but the like creative impulse, right? Because if machines can produce serviceable erotica, right, and it's customizable because you can fine tune the prompt that you're giving it, and it's unique every time. There are a lot of people who, that's what if they had UBI, that's what they would be doing. They would be writing, not very great stuff, lowest 50% quality kind of filler stuff, but they have fun doing it and they like sharing with people, and then that just all disappears because machines can do it better. And I don't know, are people really going to go for like bespoke written word?
But they don't need to. I mean, if that person's doing it for fun, then they're doing it for fun. If they're not doing it to make money, then like they're going to make it for themselves because they think it's fun and show it to their friends, and I still don't think anything is lost because a machine can do it better. Like,
kind of yes and no, though. Like I don't do this show because people listen to it, but if I knew that nobody listened to it, I probably wouldn't do it anymore.
Yeah,
right?
when you write things, having other people read it is a large part of the joy, even if it's just your friends, And
if your friends are talking about how they're treating GPT-2's latest book, and it was way more engaging than yours, and it's like, oh, well, shoot.
I don't know. I mean, fan fiction is still really popular, and there's, like, it's not maybe good in the way that, like, professional novelists' work is good, but there's still something interesting about it. And I think especially because, like, you do find it circulating around communities, and there's known authors, and, like, I would read my friend's fiction even if it wasn't very good. If my friend was like, I wrote this, and I'd like to know what you think about it, or whatever. I think there's like a social aspect to it that I don't think GPT-2 is going to do away with, because you don't really care about, like, you're not going to like follow GPT-2 in People magazine or like, oh, what are they doing,
and we still have nerds who listen to vinyl, so like there'll always be that like desire for like the old vintage stuff that people used to enjoy 5 years ago, right? So
yeah, it actually wouldn't be that hard to eliminate podcasts, like the lowest common denominator.
Oh, we're screwed.
Podcasts. All you would need all you would need is like some transcripts and just text to speech. I mean, the technology is not there, but 5-10 years.
Yeah, we'll be out of the job.
I think there's some YouTube channels that are like that already.
Oh, there actually are.
Oh yeah, they're
there's some crazy the automated. You know what? That's a whole other topic. But there's like automated programs that make videos for kids.
Oh God.
I saw a thing about this on Reddit.
Yeah, there's a great TED Talk about it.
Oof. If it's what I'm thinking of, for like it's bizarrely sexual and stuff.
Uh-huh.
I mean, some can get there on accident. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just it's just the recycled crap that 3-year-olds love, but it can go in bizarre places because the machines have no idea what they're doing.
I imagine making just like standard lather, rinse, repeat episodes of like Teletubbies would be remarkably easy for a computer to do it, and in today's tech, right? So yeah, it'd be hard to imagine paying people to get in puffy suits to do that shit anymore, when you could just do CGI ones for a fraction of the cost and make them every 3 seconds, and they take 30 minutes to watch. So yeah, wild stuff. I realize we have some dead air going on.
I'm just thinking about 3-year-olds being entertained by these algorithms that any adult could see are just dumb, but 3-year-olds really like them. And how different is a 3-year-old from like a souped-up GPT-2?
That plus, I mean, like, not to put down people who enjoy some games, but like, they make a new Call of Duty every single year, and it's exactly like the last one, right?
Yeah,
So,
we like some amount of repetition as humans.
Dude, I have sex like at a rate that is more than 0, and it's not that different from time to time. You know, a few things change up, but somehow I'm just liking those same motions over and over. It's weird.
all right, Teletubbies, first-person shooter video games, sex. I definitely see how we seem like GPT-2 robots jumping from topic to topic. What's your schedule like, Alexander? I think we're over your time. We had some delays getting started here.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I don't have that much more to add as far as observations or like what I've seen it do, or what the paper implies that the better version of it can do.
How long do you think until we get something like really souped up that'll make people question? I guess people are already questioning, was this written by an AI or a human? But like, that'll make people question, does this AI know what it's saying?
Yeah, well, doesn't know what it's saying. That I think we're quite a ways from. There are a lot of expert systems right now. Like a lot of sports articles are just written by computer already, and a lot of business articles too, which is especially concerning because there are also robots that read these business articles and make trading decisions based on them.
At some point, humans will be out of the financial loop entirely.
Well, I mean, we're already getting painfully close to that. There was a flash crash of the market that was pinned on high frequency trading algorithms. It wasn't
like 2
anything
years ago, right?
that happened in.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it wasn't anything that happened in like the fundamentals of the market. It was just robots trading back and forth, and then they like started panic selling because
Other robots were.
it's just this emergent system that has not that much relationship to anything that's actually happening. But yeah, they're business articles that are written by robots and consumed by robots already. So this is sort of a matter of GPT-2, which is an excellent multitasker, trying to edge into what are currently expert systems, or expert systems with some neural network backend a little bit. So I think we're basically there as far as, was this written by a person or a computer? Because there are a lot of articles I've read where I thought, oh, this is probably a computer.
Or
Just because it, for sports articles especially, they'll just, they have a list of statistical things that happened in the game that were recorded by someone, and they'll just spit out an article about, what the least likely things were, or that are in a certain style. But that's not, that's all bespoke. It's not as part of a multitasker. I think it'll be, in a year or two, we'll probably see something like GPT-2 being used in the wild, as outside of like a novelty website like StyleGAN has a couple of them now. This person is not real.
Wait,
Yeah,
what?
that was what I was thinking
Have
about
you
before we
seen
started, Inyash. That's where it amalgamated a bunch of human faces. I want to say like 10
that.
million, and then generated a bunch of human faces that don't actually belong to any individuals. They just look exactly like real people, like down to the irises, the eye lines, and everything. And then this tied in. I saw a thing on the programming subreddit yesterday, where someone did this with anime waifus, and it was like your waifu is not real or something. And then when I was reading it, it was on Gwern's website. Gwern put this together.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up because I'm an artist,
Yeah.
and there's a bunch of AIs that draw now.
Damn.
When we were talking about like writers being replaced by a writing robot, there's already a lot of robots that do art, and they're getting better really fast. And like there was that hilarious one that just generates anime girls. That's the only thing
Yeah.
it does, and it does it really well. So people were saying, well, you could just kind of use this to, if you have a text-based game where there's just a static picture of a person, like you could make a video game and just use this as your art engine and not need to hire artists. So that's happening.
And as someone who likes being hired as an artist, that's probably sad to hear.
Actually, I've found it really interesting so far. I mean, like, there is the concern about down the road, are there just going to be no artists? I don't think that's going to happen. I think humans like to make stuff too much. And
I think they also like to be paid to make stuff.
yeah, there's the money thing, too. I just, like, I want there to be UBI, and I think eventually we're going to have to deal with that.
Totally.
Like, we've got robots now that can replace humans, or the, prototypes of that, so we're going to have to start having that conversation. But, like, I think that I'm happy
Yeah.
that some of these tools exist, because I find that they're really good for option generation or for experimenting. There's a lot of art that's boring, and the same thing with writing, because I've written too. There's the parts that are really exciting, the cool creative parts that you want to get into, like, oh, what does this character look like? Or, I'm going to draw a building that looks like this, and then there's the, like, now I have to draw every brick or every strand of hair. And you don't want to do that part. It would be cool if you could just get a robot to do that part.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see first is people working with robots, like rather than on their own. And a lot of that is going to be labor saving, especially the labor that people don't really want to do. I would love if there were like an editing robot that I could just send chapters to, and it could be like, oh, point out a bunch of stuff. And we're getting
Yeah,
close
there's some pretty
there.
good editing tools.
Yeah, my experience has been that they do a lot of false positives that make the editing not really that much faster. So, but I mean, we're getting there. Yeah, definitely. But so as far as people making money from art, the more labor that you can save, I think you get better art out of that. If 1 hour of human time is suddenly if you can do in 1 hour what used to take 2 hours, you're going to get better art out of that, in theory.
I don't think we have a shortage of art right now. I mean, there is more produced every minute than I could consume in a month. But the hard part is, I don't know, getting not just something that's good, but something that other people are also interested in at the same time. You want to appreciate art socially with other people. That's why things like We've Got Worm is so great.
Yeah, I think for my opinion is that there's so much art and media produced right now that you can choose to be picky, and it's more about either the top 1% of quality or the what your particular preferences are as far as subject matter or themes or things like that. And that's where I think labor saving helps a lot, because you can sort of expand your niche without needing more people to get into it, right? Like I don't know, like if you have a specific you want the 80s aesthetic, right, in your written work, there aren't that many options for that. And if you start piling in more stuff, like if you want the sci-fi future as imagined by the 80s, how many people are actually writing that or drawing that? There's not an infinite amount of that to consume. So as far as either having that stuff automatically generated, from nothing by itself, or labor saving for artists, that's kind of where I think the application is just expanding the long tail of media, I guess.
Interesting. Real quick, how do you how well do you think this would work in things like debate as a debate partner to pull up quick facts for you from the internet or to check what your opponent is saying?
Real-time fact-checking, I do not think that it's very good right now. Partly because if you go like it can answer questions, but let me find some of the ones that.
Yeah, it's not actually concerned with facts, right? It's not going and looking stuff up on the internet. It's predicting what word is going to come after this word. It can just make facts up wholesale.
Yeah,
So if enough people argue that the Earth is flat, it can find you facts that's the case.
Yeah.
Like when Stephen Colbert saved the elephant population
Right. That was awesome.
by having his listeners
Yeah.
update the Wikipedia page.
So this was one of the there in the paper. There were a bunch of question and answer ones, and it's much worse at the Q&A stuff at the lower levels. So the public version is worse at this. But like the answer, what is the most common blood type in Sweden? And it says A, right?
Yeah.
And that is not correct. And it said that with 70% probability that was correct. So if it's going to do false positives like that, where it'll say, "Oh, I'm 70% certain that this is correct," and you just can't trust it all, then you can't use it for fact
What if you
checking.
hooked it up to Wolfram Alpha?
Well, that's the thing, is like Wolfram Alpha is already there, right? I mean, you could maybe do it for coverage of things that aren't in Wolfram Alpha, or you could hook it up to. They excluded, I think, a lot of Wikipedia from their web
wasn't that
text.
because most other text generative AIs use Wikipedia?
Yeah.
And they just didn't want it to kind of look
Yes.
like all the other ones out there.
Yeah, and that was part of the point. So you could hook more stuff in, and it would probably get more accurate, but that's one of the things about it, is that it's a very good multitasker, but for the specific tasks, there's so many bots out there and systems out there and programs that already are like hyper focused on those specific tasks that you don't need a neural network for. Like Wolfram Alpha just is looking at databases of facts, which is all you really need for that kind of thing. I think where maybe there's some utility is in parsing a question and like knowing what type of answer it wants, because some questions are long and circuitous, and it's hard to understand
To
what
summarize a
question is even
question.
asking for.
That's funny.
Yeah. So it might be helpful in that for questions or statements that aren't straightforward or specifically phrased for a robot.
Did you hear the can an AI change your mind debate?
I don't think I did. No.
There was God, I don't remember what podcast I heard it on. Probably the Reason podcast. Now that I think of it, or maybe no, it was one of the Intelligence Squared ones, where an actual debater and an AI who I think must have been a GPT-2 derivative, or if not GPT-2 itself, debated. They were given 20 minutes before the debate started the question. Something about, free kindergarten should be extended to everyone in America, or something along those lines. And the AI debated for, and the human debated against. And I mean, the human was obviously better. He was more convincing, and the AI kind of repeated its same points over and over, and didn't. It was obvious it didn't have a deep understanding of anything. It was just sort of repeating some surface arguments, but it was surprisingly articulate, and you could tell there was something there. It just wasn't very good, and that's what made me think maybe if it had been combined with a human together, they could do a better job.
Well, yeah, they could. And the other thing is that people aren't perfect thinking machines, and so if you just bombard someone with arguments, and it'd be pretty easy to get an AI like this one to, or I guess a language model like this one, because I don't think they call it an artificial intelligence. But it would be pretty easy to get one that can do a Gish Gallop, right? Just bombard someone with sources and citations and stuff like that, and you don't actually need to make, cogent arguments. You can just bury someone under. That may be my dim view of how good people are at separating fact from fiction or actually evaluating an argument on its merits, but
Well, you can
I think
tell.
that's.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's held up in psychological studies. There are people that aren't paying attention,
Yeah.
or that have motivated reasoning and are completely swayed by the Gish Gallop style of debate,
Right.
which is what could make something like GPT-2 kind of concerning. The other thing that I heard a lot of people scaremongering is maybe the wrong word, because I think it's a legit concern, but talking about was fake news. This thing could be really good at generating fake news.
Yeah. Yeah, and anything where you just don't care about the truth, you just care about
Sheer amount of words
sheer
generated.
amount of words generated. You can, it'd be so easy to set up like 100 different websites or have a bunch of sock puppets that are just repeating the same talking points with enough variation that you can't actually tell that they're sock puppets, right?
I mean, that sort of thing is done precisely now, but you tend to have people behind it doing it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, yeah, you could do this on a scale that is not, that would make it so hard to weed past all the bullshit. Yeah, if you didn't actually have to have people behind this writing all these things, then yeah, this wasn't the first time this sort of thing had crossed my mind through this conversation, and the level of text analysis and stuff kind of brought a couple political figures to mind as well, and the disregard for basing the assertions in facts so rings a bell as well. Yeah, that's disconcerting, and I definitely don't see how that's going to be dodged. I mean, they mentioned how they're not releasing the full version, but like Enosh said, that's going to come out eventually. But I do like the idea of trying to pump the brakes a bit and say, hold on, before this thing gets out of control, let's try and get some conversations going about how we're going to tackle this.
Well, in the debate, where you could really tell it was an AI was the second part where they responded to each other. The AI didn't. I mean, you could tell it didn't know what the other person was really saying. It didn't respond like a human. Even if a human didn't know the answer and was just trying to gish gallop you, they would find a clever way to bring things around and dodge the question and stuff. And the AI just basically acted like there hadn't been a question asked of it. It was interesting. I think that with things like this, at least for the next year or two, we could pretty quickly weed out the human from the AI by going with follow-up questions.
Well, yeah, but I think there's a couple things with that. One, I'm brought to mind of a bad debate I saw between Dinesh D'Souza and Peter Singer 10, 12 years ago.
Oh, where they just talked past each other the whole time.
Well,
the
no,
one you're talking about.
Singer was engaging everything, and Dinesh D'Souza was not, and he was just making this. He would make the same things over and over every time it was his turn to talk.
Yeah,
It was like a
politicians do
robot.
that too. I mean, they're
Yeah.
actually trained to do that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
actually engage the question. You just talk about the thing that well, here's what I think about the economy. And it's that's not the question at all.
And my concern isn't so much that we won't be able to discern whether these authors are people or not. Because I mean, right now, these Russian bots are people, but that doesn't really matter. I could talk to them if they were willing to engage and discern whether or not they were robots. But the point is, they're putting out enough content has enough clickbaity, shareable stuff to put on Facebook and Twitter that it gets spread out, and nobody bothers to take the time to sit there and analyze. Maybe this is not a person, or maybe this isn't true.
Yeah, and
you get it.
And on top of that, you have selection effects in place, right? So if you're having bots generate 1 million tweets, it doesn't matter if half of them are crap or even 90% of them are crap that are obviously robots. The stuff that's going to get shared and then seen is going to be the stuff that's the most human-like and the most compelling.
Yeah, it's
so I don't.
startling.
It's going to be a problem. It's already. I mean, it's an extension of the problems that we already have, though, which we already can't solve. So,
A quick question. I've sort of gotten to the point where I don't really believe anything anymore. If I see it, I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder if it's true. And I think this might be bad in general for human society. Do you guys find yourself reacting that way to the just overwhelming mass of disinformation out there, or what strategies do you use?
I do that all the time. And there was that. The most recent example was, who was that actor from, not The Wire, I don't know, that actor who paid people to beat him up and then claimed he was assaulted by Trump supporters?
Oh, yeah.
When I heard that he was jumped by Trump supporters out leaving something, someone told me about this, and I was like, oh man, if that's true, that really sucks, is what I actually said. And then it turns out it wasn't. But when I hear something that sounds like it really fits a narrative, especially, and there's other side news too that does the exact same thing, where it's like, oh, that sucks if that's true, and it swings the other way. I would like to think that if I cared enough, I could dig into any individual instance and see if there's something to it. But even, I mean, that could take a day, to see if this author's real or something, right? That could take forever.
Yeah. There's, on one hand, I want to say increasing the amount of skepticism out there is a good thing for humanity. I would actually like it if people didn't believe everything they read on the internet or saw on Facebook and fact-checked it first, but there's the extent to which, how easy is it going to be to fact-check some of this stuff?
Yeah.
And also, yeah, what Stephen was just talking about, fact checking everything does get to be really exhausting, and we have heuristics for a reason because we're trying to conserve mental power for things that are actually important, rather than like, is that news story true?
Yeah, totally. I think even just fact checking one thing can be exhausting. Like I said, I mean, if you're digging in to see if did this really happen, that could take most of a day.
And since you don't have time for all that, your heuristic is what feels the most emotionally true to me, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's not even so much just everything. 'Cause you could, especially like skimming through a Twitter feed or something, could cross 50 things, and that would take you 2 months. But like, just one thing, I can't think of anything I've read recently that I cared enough about to dig at for half a day. But I think my current strategy is like, I'll see something like, huh, well, I guess we'll see what happens when the dust settles in a couple weeks. Yeah. And then usually, if something happens, there's follow up, and I'll get something on it from that.
I mean, I try generally not to talk about very recent things on the podcast for that reason. Like, maybe it's entirely different from what we think. And I also do the my main rule is I don't share something before Googling it. And I mean, that doesn't weed out everything, but
that is so far above and beyond what almost anybody does. That's super awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't weed out everything, but it gets like the most surface level obvious crap out the door right away. And just if I don't want to share something, I don't necessarily Google it. I'll be like, huh, interesting. And like you said, if that's true, that's a bummer. But if I actually share it, then I Google it first.
Yeah, I tend to completely ignore anecdotes, like things that happen to one person, as being not irrelevant, but like there's so many things that happen that a single person is always such a, that doesn't tell you anything about statistical distributions, right?
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's one data point.
Yeah, it's one data point. It's, because of the way social media works, it's the most usually the most vitriolic and biased data point that compelled people to share, right? Whereas I care a lot more about statistical trends or like hard data. I tend not to read, news articles anymore, especially since most of them are like a mangling of some primary source.
Yeah. Like
for GPT2, I'm gonna. There are people I trust on certain things, but I would way rather just go read the primary source and spend my time on that, and then question the biases of that author, as a better way. I mean, even studies are, you got to worry about p-hacking, you got to worry about, all kinds of different stuff if you read the primary source of the study too, but there's so much of news that I just have to like push to the side as being basically irrelevant to anything. Because I mean, as people, we're very individualized and we focus on those individual things so much more, and that's always what gets the most play as far as outrage culture and stuff goes. I don't know. It's one of those things I think about a lot, but I basically just have to sequester myself as a coping mechanism.
How big is GPT-2? Like, if I were to want to download it and run it on my laptop, would it melt my machine, or?
Nope. It is 4.5. Okay, no. I just downloaded a virtual machine for it, which was 4 gigabytes, I think. You do not need that much if you are going to go through the work of setting up Python and the dependencies and stuff like that. But I just downloaded a virtual machine that was open at the console window, so I could skip all that stuff. But that and it runs on my netbook just fine. It takes a while. Like, you put in your prompt and then you're just waiting there for 30 seconds or a minute or something, because it's a netbook and it's underpowered, but it's not very big. I mean, it's not that much work to run.
So it doesn't have the storage of everything it read with that 4 gigs, does it?
No, everything it read is 40 gigabytes. So this is just the neural network that was generated from training on that 40 gigabytes of data.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So the only stuff it knows is stuff that's in the neural network. Like, I mean, even in its full form, it's never referring back to any articles or something. It's just referring to what's to the weightings in the neural network.
That is so cool.
So you're an author. Have you tried to make this thing do some work for you, like write a short story or two and try to sell it somewhere?
Not yet. I was thinking that I would try to do that just for the novelty of it.
Yeah.
I don't
I think it could be cool for idea prompts.
Yeah, well, and I said I was trying to do magic items for D&D because I write Worth the Candle, which is a lit RPG, and it has a bunch of D&D items, and I was like, yeah, I could just make new ones or at least get inspiration from it. Middling success on that, because it kind of likes to wander off, or just it's like do nonsense in the style of item descriptions, because you feed it like 5 item descriptions and hope to get a 6th back, and it just is like it's in the style of it, but it's not saying anything, and it's not even that good for idea generation, because it's just words that like I'm trying to make sense of. I don't know. I haven't had a lot of luck with that so far. I'm going to be trying more short story generation tonight to see if you can like hammer something into shape. Because
Nice.
I do think the promise is in the Centaur approach, but it's a question of I think I'll probably spend more time on it than if I just wrote a short story, because I like to write a short story pretty fast. Trying to do it with a computer and then editing all of its like garbage into something that makes sense on more than just a surface level. I want to try it, but I'm not optimistic at all.
I would be fascinated for you to get back to us like in a few days and just let us know how that went.
Yeah, I will.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we've been going on for a while. We should probably wrap it up. Is there anything any of you guys wanted to say, ask?
I'm still feeling pretty bummed about how we're talking about how this is just this nightmare fake news factory. Is there any good news? Or any optimism we can draw from this development?
Hey, soon humans will be obsolete.
Better machine translation, better question answering, better summarization of news, which is, I mean, we might run into the problem where you have AI generating fake news and then AI summarizing that fake news, but we were just talking about how it is hard to do fact checking. That would be a lot easier if you could do automatic summaries of various things. I don't know how. I mean, that kind of somewhat defeats the purpose of a deep dive, but it would help a lot to be able to have automatically generated abstracts at least, so that you would know going into reading through an article whether it was worth your time or not. If it could at least get you the central thrust. Again, summarization, one of the things that it's worst at, and it's still pretty good. But
That's interesting because like there's those like summary bots on Reddit that you link to a news source and it'll give you 3 paragraph synopsis of it, which it just grabs direct quotes. I think.
Yeah, it does. I think the most popular one is it does sentence entropy, so it's like picking out the most important sentences from the article. But that's still pretty good because there's a lot of fluff in a lot of those articles.
Yeah, I love those summary bots. I mean, if I care enough, I'll read the full thing. But I've done that where I've compared the full thing against the summary, and yeah, it seems to capture most of the essential information, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So this could be even better than those at summary and abstracts drawing and stuff.
So yeah, I think there's some good news. We'll have to see what people actually end up using it for.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Right.
Was there anything you wanted to say? And you should also plug Worth the Candle real quick and tell people where they can find that.
Yeah, Worth the Candle. Just Google it. I guess it's on Archive of Our Own. It's got a long URL, but I think it's the top result. And if it's not,
We'll add a link in the show notes as well.
Yeah. But that's fine. That's the current thing I'm writing. I'm always writing new stuff. So, one of the things that I am currently working on as sort of my second project for when that's done is one that's based around this kind of thing, of like the marriage between neural networks and automatic generation systems and how we sort of use them and react to them. So that'll be in like a year or two though. So
Sounds awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. And if you get any results back from your experiments tonight in the next couple of days, let us know. We'll include those too.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. Good night.
All right, good
Good night.
night.
Okay. On to our less wrong post-discussion section of the show.
Yay.
The first of the two that we're doing today is Tsuyuku Naratai versus the Egalitarian Instinct. Did I say that right?
You said
Close enough.
You said the first part right. You said egalitarian. It's egalitarian instinct. So you got the English
I
wrong.
was focusing so much on the Japanese.
So you Japaneseified the English word.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. No worries. All right. So my one sentence summary of this is just like kind of where we've evolved impulses as social primates to like not want to, I guess, showboat when we're being exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't try.
Yeah.
And that, you know, there might be good reasons for humility to I don't know, not say how easy something was, or, you know, yeah, I guess I am the best at that. But, you know, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't actually try to be the best.
Yeah.
So I think it's just maybe, I'm assuming this is some response to feedback on the Tsuruku Naitai episode on the post, but
It seemed to me, I don't know, it seemed like it was just a postscript to Tsunuku Naratai, and they could have almost been one post. But here's the weird thing. I recall the first time I read this being like really, I don't know if moved is the right word, but I was like, yeah, that's right, exactly, you know, going along with it. I was like, I was very happy to see this. And now going back and reading it, it didn't really touch anything in me at all. And I don't know if that's because I've changed or what, but
you're just less humble now.
Yeah, maybe you just totally took it to heart and you're reading it now and you're like, yeah, obviously.
anyway. But it basically, are you familiar with this was made all the rounds, I think, about a year ago. It's been going on forever, though, because obviously hunter-gatherers. The insulting the meat thing?
Mm-mm.
Okay, there's not a hunter-gatherer tribe anymore, but like a tribe that's still very much in the old living sense, and they hunt for meat, and if someone comes in with like a really impressive game catch that they did most of the work themselves, everyone knows they did this, right? When they bring in the meat, they're like, oh man, this is bad meat, and like everyone in the tribe insults the meat.
Oh, I did hear something about this recently.
Yeah.
Where did I hear this? You wouldn't know, but
Right,
something
I know.
recently.
Yeah, but it was, everyone knows it's good meat, and they're still all impressed with what he did. But like they say, yeah, we gotta keep people humble, you know, so they don't get too big heads or anything. And it's a weird ritual, but like every society has that, right?
Yeah, some more than others.
I think I just saw this like in a link in in the comment section of a Slate Star Codex post on Reddit or something. It was something obscure, but I just saw something like that in the last week where it was like, don't insult the meat, and it was a hyperlink. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And so I just read about this. Okay, yeah. So the goal is to keep the triumphant murderer of this, I guess not, whatever, the successful hunter of this food humble by saying, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I've had better.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone remember Liar Liar? That was
Yes.
classic. That was what that line reminds me of.
No.
Was that a direct reference, or was that an
No, I
accident?
didn't. I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's a great movie if you can stand whatever late 90s or early 2000s Jim Carrey. The premise is he can't lie for a day, and he's this asshole lawyer. And he first discovers this when he's got some girl that he took home for the night.
His boss.
Oh, it was his boss. And
Yes.
She was like, that was a great night, huh? And he's like, I've had better. And he's like laughing to himself in the mirror. He's like, why would I say that? All right, yeah. That's my movie digression. It's that time of the night. I kept it together for the podcast, or for the guest mostly. So
I'm proud of you.
now I'm all over the place. Thank you.
But it was basically a post pushing back against that, saying, you know what, if you do keep trying to make yourself stronger and make yourself better, you will be, you know, possibly better than some people.
You run the risk
sometimes.
of succeeding.
Exactly, yes. And that's okay. Just keep trying your best. There'll be other people that are better than you in most other things, and that's fine too. People are not all the same, and different people can excel in different things, and stop trying to stifle everything and keep everybody at the same level of meh.
Yeah, I like that. There was
just in the interests of everyone being egalitarian.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because there was actually a good little quote in there that I didn't pull out that was, you know, you might be better than the average person at some things, but, you know, the average person's better than people who are below average at things by definition, right? And so, you know, somebody could charge you with like, why would you try and do better than them? That's so rude of you. And it's like, oh, well, come on, we're not going to buy that. You know, it's like, I might suck at math. That doesn't mean that you should like
suck at it
yeah,
too.
that you should suck at it too, certainly.
Yeah.
What if anything, it should mean that unless we have an agreement, like we're friends and I won't be offended if you're better than me at it, that you don't rub it in my face, right? If I'm thin-skinned about it or something. But that doesn't mean that just because you know people or people in your tribe aren't you know, I think that's it. Is if you try, you might run the risk of actually succeeding. And it doesn't even seem to, in my reading of the post, didn't even really seem to like admonish that you ought to express humility. It's saying that it might be politically savvy for you to express humility.
If you absolutely must express humility, then I guess go ahead and do that. Seemed to be kind of the vibe going on there.
I think, it was sort of a take pride in your accomplishments sort of feel. And I think one of the reasons it probably talked to me more back then was because I was closer to high school. And in high school, there's a lot of like, you know, you get nerd shamed, or at least back in my day you did, you know.
Nerds are totally accepted now, Inyash. It's 2019.
Right? They control the world now, so now they pick on jocks in high school? Is this how it works?
I think they get their robots to beat them up.
Oh, yeah. Sweet. We didn't have robots back in my day. You couldn't just like flash your iPhone at someone and stun them.
I think it is. I think it's partly a cultural shift too. I think it's only been recently, and I guess I'm not super into the community or the cutting edge, but you know, I talk to people in the rationalist community who are working on trying to find like non-asshole ways of saying, yes, I'm successful, and it's because of rationality. Like that's in edges at least of the community that I'm involved with directly. That's sort of a new position. Like, you know, you don't want to be, I don't know, saying yes, I'm doing well or something, right? And you know, to give it credit to this, I think that's kind of where this post was going. Is like, hey, if you guys start kicking ass because you go to cognitive sciences and biases and stuff, don't feel ashamed to plug the old rationality thing.
I think a lot of that was just beat into, I don't know if us in general, but me anyway, in high school, you know, don't display your smartness because you'll get punished for it. And this is like saying, you know what, fuck it.
That's a lot of religious communities too. There's like the whole idea about how you're not supposed to take credit for things you have done because God did it. And nobody's better than anybody else because we're all children of God.
Yeah, I got to say that maddens me a lot whenever I see some of that sentiment, you know, isn't God great this happened? And I know we've been railing on religion lately. Maybe we're on a kick. But I don't like that sentiment because you never see it in reverse. And it's like, oh man, God sucks. He just killed all those babies in New Orleans because that's not God's fault. But the response to it is when people give money and time and run out there to go help, that's God helping. Like, no, that's people helping. We don't make the weather. We help. And I love there's a charitable interpretation of the sentiment, like look for God in the human response. That sounds like a, you know, almost Mr. Rogers vibe, right? And that's super wholesome and friendly. Like, no, look for kindness in the response to tragedy and that sort of stuff. I like that.
Yeah.
But attributing it to an agent rather than like taking it from the person, that sounds like a drag.
Yeah, there's ways it can be phrased in such a way. Like I like that Mr. Rogers phrasing. But I have like seen it really explicitly being used to rebuke young people for being too high and mighty.
Oh yeah.
Wow. And again, like I'm thinking about like specifically I don't know. So there's some religions that it seems to be the more fundamentalist ones. Like I don't know if it maybe because I'm trying to figure out where this kind of egalitarian instinct maybe comes from. I feel like psychologically there might be something useful, or there might have been, if you're in like a pretty scarce society, to tell people don't like push yourself up as being higher than the rest of the community because they need everybody to be, you know, to be prioritizing the community. Not that I'm trying to say that I disagree with the post either, but I'm just trying to figure out where it came from.
You know, this is on my mind because we were literally just talking about Harry Potter before the show started, which if you are a Patreon sponsor, you can hear. It's for our Patreons only in the extras bits. But we were saying like how some people really hate Harry at the beginning of Harry Potter and the Message of Rationality, right? And like I even knew someone who, very nerdy, good friend of mine, very smart, started reading it and was like, Harry Potter is such a little asshole. He's like a jerk and he's all arrogant and jumped up. And when we were talking about this just now, I was like, Harry Potter was fully embracing the Tsuyukinari Tai versus egalitarian instinct. He was like, I'm, here's some things I'm good at. There's certain kinds of smartness, and I'm happy about it and proud about it, and I'm not gonna like hide it and try to pretend that I'm a muggle.
There was a great line in the latter part of the book. It was during one of the wars when it was just him and Neville versus Hermione's army, and the rest of Chaos Legion was fighting Dragon Army, and he was like, "What, am I supposed to be the last person in the school to notice how awesome I am?" Which is about as arrogant as he gets. But this was like, I think I brought this up with in my undergraduate psych major. I had to take an abnormal psych class, which was like the whatever psychological diagnoses for disorders and stuff. And it was like one of those stadium seating things. There's like 200-300 people, and I was constantly up in the balcony because I liked up there, and I'd be raising my hand to ask questions, and the teacher was, was willing to engage me, shouting over the balcony. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions I asked was like narcissism or something, narcissistic personality disorder. And I was like, what if you really just are as awesome as you think you are? Mm-hmm. Like, was Isaac Newton a narcissist? I mean, he'd probably been a nightmare to interact with, but he basically was as badass maybe as he thought he was, right?
Yeah.
So like, is the grandiosity, is the delusion of grandiosity a necessary requirement for this disorder? And I think, I don't remember what the answer was. Probably depends. Like if it's ruining your life, it's basically when it's a problem.
Okay.
Or when it's diagnosed.
Or making everyone else hate you, which I guess would ruin your life.
Yeah.
That friend of mine, I think she specifically didn't like Harry because he talked back to adults.
I've heard that from a lot of people who've read the story, particularly adults who have kids.
Yeah.
Or
She
are
had
teachers.
kids.
But that's really weird to me because it's like this, okay, children should be submissive mindset, which if the kid is right, then the kid's right. You gotta like, as the adult, you should be a little bit more modest and maybe be like, oh.
I think it's that same instinct of people should know their place in society and not like, act like they're better than everyone else
and
wants them to be.
You could see where it was adaptive probably, back in the day for kids to be submissive, but not anymore. Not as much.
Yeah, not if they're Harry Potter, James Evans, Varys.
Yeah, I think the hard part is that, like, in a lot of ways, most kids aren't people. And, like, that's one of the things that Harry points out is, like, oh, sure, I'm not a person, I'm just a kid. And something to that effect. But, like, the parent who has to spend an hour arguing with their, the hunter-gatherer parent, arguing with their kid about, like, why you shouldn't go over and play near that lake that's full of alligators, like, that kid's just going to get eaten, right? Because they're going to either not agree and they're going to go over and get eaten, or they're going to burn their parent out or whatever, right?
Well, even
we sort of have that now with traffic.
Right.
But
even the parent that has to argue with their kid in the middle of a grocery store why they can't have another, bag of lollipops or something is going to feel that same way.
Yeah, I'm really interested in running the experiment on my niece, that like just treating her like a human adult the whole time. Because it worked on my cousin, but she I think she is exceptional. I think, we'll see where my niece is at. I'm sure she'll be great too. But like, just I could imagine being at the store with some screaming kid. But I guess I'm not mine, because mine wouldn't do that. Whatever. But I think if you have the rapport of like being a reasonable person to engage the whole time, which the hard part is like kids you can't reasonably engage. I know we're pretty far afield, but whatever. When they're kids and they're just mad and they don't know why, like they can't articulate their own feelings. Quick sidebar. Anna Harris, Sam Harris's wife, teaches meditation to children as young as 5 and 6.
Teaches what?
Meditation.
Oh.
Just basic like introspection, but they can get children, I think, around the age of 5 plus or minus a year to like label their emotions, and just the presence of mind to be like, oh yeah, I am happy or I am sad, like that reflective awareness of your emotional
a lot of
state.
adults don't have that.
A lot of adults don't have that, exactly. And so if a kid can look in and be like, I'm mad right now, and if they're aware enough of that, I imagine that's the kind of child you can engage with, in who's having a fit in the store and be like, you're upset right now, aren't you? Do you want to talk about it? I think, I don't know. I'm kind of, the best part about being an uncle as opposed to a parent is that like the kid's not my problem. Yeah. So like if it just won't shut up, I take it back to its mom's house and it's her problem again, right?
Like they're referring to it as an it.
Yeah. Now it's an it. Now that it's a problem, she's not a problem. She's the person when she's fine. When it's making noise, then it's annoying.
Yeah. I don't know, until I was in my mid-20s, always just treated kids like people, like other adults.
Yeah.
I mean, not as experienced, but whatever. And kids seem to really love me, which I was like, okay, that's weird, but sure, whatever. And I didn't really put two together. Then I started being socialized with how adults are supposed to treat kids. And like now it's really hard for me to go back. But yeah, kids not nearly as fond of me anymore.
I think you just talk to them and be like, hey, what are you up to?
Yeah.
What do you I don't know. Talk to them like you would a person.
Right, now
it's a weird thought. Maybe it's easier.
harder to do now. I don't know why. I've gotten to the point where like, oh, you are a fragile alien object, and
Or like a pet or something.
yeah.
No, it's much easier to interact with kids on that level as if they were a pet. I had to deal with a lot of kids when I worked at the library, and I had a really hard time trying to treat all the kids like people. The thing with methods of rationality, and I'm trying to form a coherent thought here. There's some kids that are, prodigies. I know a lot of kids that had been child prodigies really love methods of rationality because they related to Harry a lot. And I think I really liked the Harry character because I could think back to being a kid and feeling frustrated with not being treated like a person, and I think a lot of kids harbor resentment around that. So the reason they probably really loved you is that they don't get that from adults in their life. They don't get any kind of validation of like, oh, your feelings are valid, this thought you had is interesting. So yeah, I try to keep that in mind. It does get difficult though with the kids that are more frustrating to deal with.
Yeah.
Who tend to have less of that kind of theory of mind going on, or are just like very impulsive, or kids that have behavioral problems just act out and want to throw things. You can't reason with that kid as easily as you can with the kid that like is reading N.K. Jemisin,
Right.
and like programming in Python.
I related to the character of Harry from Methods of Rationality because I wished I was a child prodigy, and I was like, oh, I wish I was that cool as a kid. But yeah, I think unless you had any desire for that sort of outstandingness or were that kid, then I could see I'd be off-putting to some people. I think we were talking about like some of the critiques of the show, of the character before we started recording, and one thing is that like people who don't really know what to expect, they get into it and they're like, that's not an 11-year-old, this is stupid. And it's not like the author's unaware that's not how 11-year-olds usually talk, and there's an in-universe explanation for why this kid is weird. So yeah.
Well, he was also like an author mouthpiece, but I think Yukowski was a child prodigy.
He was, and he was.
There
that's
are
true on both
11-year-olds that do
counts.
talk like that.
Yeah, I've met some.
Yeah.
It's uncanny.
I bet. Yeah, I think it's an aside thing, but yeah.
Should we move?
Yeah, the last. I'll read us on to the next one with the end quote from this last post, which was "Saruku nai tai." I'll always run as fast as I can, even if I pull ahead. I'll keep on running, and someone someday will surpass me. But even though I fall behind, I'll always run as fast as I can. And that's sort of like the same spirit, Like I don't have to be the best in the world, but I'm gonna be the best me that I can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way that you put it last time resonated with me a lot. It was like, I'm not gonna compare myself to the Olympic athlete. I'm gonna compare myself to myself. And I'm gonna beat me at
Yep.
it. That's important. I love that. That should have been in this. That should have been in the thing. That's the way I paraphrase in my head all the time now.
Cool.
All right, statistical bias.
Statistical bias.
Quotes.
In quotes. So this one at first really intimidated me because it had like a bunch of math, and math isn't like an intuitive thing to me. I had to like sit down and analyze it to understand what it was saying, and it took some time and some effort. But really, in my opinion, you could have stripped out the math from this post entirely. It just seemed to be saying that when a system is biased to not give a correct result, then running many tests will eventually, it'll converge onto a result, but that may not be the correct result. Like, for example, if you roll a 6-sided die, you may not necessarily know what side is going to come up, but if you keep rolling it long enough, eventually you'll notice that the 6 comes up 16.6% of the time. Unless it's a weighted die, and then there's bias in the system, and if you keep rolling it thousands of times, you'll eventually get to the 6 comes up like 21% of the time. You'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Dice come up on 6 21% of the time. Okay. Which is, it's just wrong, but it's not because you were doing the experiments wrong or doing the statistical analysis wrong. Everything you were doing was right. It's just the system has an inherent bias in it.
I'm with you. I think the post could have been done without math, and part of me wonders if it was just like running with the theme of the last post of like, yeah, I didn't have to be this smart when I wrote this, but I am, and here you go. I don't think that was an expressed goal, but it made me kind of chuckle when I thought of that.
The example he gave was the Emperor of China is actually 200 centimeters, and if in the U.S. on average people think he's 190 centimeters with a variation of like 10 centimeters, you can ask one person and he'll say he's 180 centimeters, and they'll be off by 10. And someone else will say, he's 200 centimeters, and they'll actually be correct. But if you keep surveying enough people, they'll all converge onto 190, and that's through the law of large numbers, you eventually got to what the system believes his height is, even though they're off by 10% statistically. Or in reality, rather. They're off by 10 centimeters. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I'm just noticing how many of the variables in the equations here are E and Y, which are Eliezer Yudkowsky's initials. Maybe that's why he got into math. It was easy for him to keep his attention. Yeah, I don't have much to add to that other than this is one of the posts that like I think it sets up for other posts better than it does stand on its own.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to really gain and run with here. It doesn't inspire me. I don't remember it in a way that anything like that.
Sometimes systems will be biased and give you information that does not accurately reflect the real world, no matter how good your methods are.
Yeah, I think this post was meant to specifically lay groundwork for and lead into the next one, the useful statistical biases. But in of itself, it's kind of just stating a fact about statistics.
Okay.
Well, if we'd thought ahead with more than a couple hours-ish before the podcast, we would have read the third one with this, but it was behind suspense for a couple of weeks.
Huzzah.
Yeah. Wasn't I going to plug something in a video game joke or something at some point? I can't remember. I was like, oh, that'll go in the video game chat later. And
I remember you saying that, and I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
well, the world will never know.
No.
I've been playing through Red Dead Redemption 2 a little bit. I'm not burning too much time playing games, but I've actually been really busy last month, which is great. But playing that a bit, and it's interesting. Like, I've complained about the game a lot, and there's still like the clunky mechanics and stuff. And there's this bullshit completionist stuff where like if you want to go through and like get the 100%, you gotta do a bunch of completely out of character stuff for like somebody who's like an outlaw trying to like do outlaw-y stuff. It's like collect like 50 of these flowers. It's like no, fuck that. But man, it does a good job of making you actually care about the characters. Like I went through a part where it's not really a spoiler. Some characters die, and I'm like, oh shit, not them. And so yeah, it does a good job reeling in that way.
Worse. In the second half, it like goes off the rails.
Yeah. Oh, I showed you the donkey review is why. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's where I got.
Yeah, I got past that part, and that was sort of a drag. Yeah.
But then it gets better again.
Kind of. I'll spoil it off air.
Okay.
But yeah, no new fun video games yet. I was plugging the movie Polar with Mads Mikkelsen. That wasn't that good, but it was great. If you like John Wick, you'll love this movie. What else is new and fun?
I think I missed the chance to make a joke about GDP2.
Oh. GPT.
PT, yes.
What was the joke?
Which was that I started playing Kingdom Hearts 3, and I'm pretty sure that that's what wrote the script for the game.
Everything I've read about and seen reviews of Kingdom Hearts 3, I totally see where you're coming from. That it was highly ambitious. It seemed like a really fun project. Like let's finally bring all these things together. But it was in its execution, it missed a lot of the marks and has a lot of really annoying components. Does that about sum it up?
Oh, I'm particularly just talking about the story, and like the character dialogue is just so bizarre. The story's gotten so convoluted over the, there's like been 3 console games and God knows how many handheld games.
I think it's like the 8th one, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So it can count just like GPT-2 does.
Yeah, they've decided that all the weird diversions and like all the extra characters they've added, like everything is canon. They're going to completely commit to it. So you'll have like Mickey and then like a Final Fantasy looking character walking through a world literally called the Realm of Darkness, which is made up of black lava with blue glowing bits talking about like the nature of consciousness and like souls and stuff. And
Holy shit.
you're kind of just like, what am I playing right
Dude.
now? Like, you keep getting like broken out of the experience by just how like some bizarre stuff. Like people start talking about the fact that some characters have like, there's you, the character, and then you have a Heartless, which is your dark version. Then there's a Nobody, which is what happens when a Heartless is created, and that's the extra stuff. And then there's also data versions of characters, so the main character will just be talking about like, yeah, and then like that was the thing that Datasaur did in the data world.
Dude, this totally feels like the JRPGs of like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I'm getting flashbacks from the Final Fantasies around then.
I think Final Fantasy plays a big part in Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
So
Totally got to pick up this Kingdom Hearts thing.
I think you got to start from the bottom or start from the early ones.
It's a fun game. Like I enjoy the game mechanics. Some of it's kind of clunky, and I don't like the number of QTEs that they kept adding into it. But the quick time events where it's like you'll be fighting a battle, and then it's like, oh, press this button really fast, and now you do a cool flip thing, but you're not in control of the character. You're just watching a cutscene.
Yeah. Spider-Man for PS4 did that a lot. Well, not a lot. I guess it did an okay number of those. What I didn't like, and I actually disabled this in the settings, where it's like, you gotta slam the square button a bunch of times to lift this car fast enough. I'm like, that's super annoying.
Yeah.
It's my thumb clicks when I bend it too much because I call it video game thumb from as a kid, smashing the A button too much.
And that's not even really a game mechanic.
So what I do instead is in the settings you can change it to where you just hold down the button.
Okay.
And it's like I'm not going to sit there and just I'm not going to. It's not hard for me to slam this button. It's just annoying. So whatever.
Yeah. I think the only game that did QuickTime events in a way that was fun and interesting was the first God of War.
And the God of War for PS4 does that too.
Okay.
And I
Are
like
they
those.
still good with it?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, oh my god, the game that I think really popularized them. Well, okay, the first game that popularized them was Dragon Lair, which was, oh my god, ridiculous. But Shenmue for the Dreamcast had that. It was basically a movie where you like decided when you get to see the next act and when you just want to wander around and collect toys. And whenever you want to go see the next act, you have to go through another stupid QuickTime event thing where like X pops up on screen, you gotta hit X fast enough, and then square pops up, you gotta hit square. And I was like, this is bullshit.
I think there was another good component to include those in is like Telltale games where not deciding is also a choice. So like you could either tell your friend X or Y or tell them nothing, and that also is like has its own ramifications because that kind of adds like this feel of like actual urgency, and those are kind of fun. But man, nothing else too exciting. I've been watching a show called Fresh Off the Boat, which is fairly popular. I think it's on its 5th season. It takes place in the 90s, and I guess a fob is a pejorative term for Asian American immigrants.
Huh.
And like they're fresh off the boat people or whatever. I guess that's not a term I was
like
familiar with. Yeah.
I never heard of that.
But they dropped the T, so fob, yeah. But the cast is fun. The cast is almost exclusively Asian, which is a lot of fun. And to the extent that it's not, they have like whatever, the dad from Twin Peaks is like the only actor I've ever seen in anything else who is a regular on the show.
You know, it would be great if they had Asians and whiteface to play the white people. They
don't have that. What they have is the best. They have some good cameos. My favorite is they've had Ken Jeong on a few times as the main character's brother, and he played Chang. He played Chang in Community and Chow in Hangover. And so then this prompted me to watch Ken Jeong on Hot Ones, which is this YouTube channel where they eat hot, spicy chicken wings. And then his hour-long stand-up special, which was not that good. He just talked about The Hangover for like 30 minutes. But it made me want to watch The Hangover again, so I did that. And then watched the second one, which was actually really brilliant. It was exactly like the first one. They replayed every beat, but in a way that like wasn't recycled. It was reused in a very great recipe to make this like an original hilarious thing while completely playing on exactly the same notes as the first movie. And then the third one, which I didn't even know existed, was just off the rails. It wasn't a hangover. They didn't like lose their memory and stuff, but it was like repercussions of like the smallest bit from the first movie. You remember, it doesn't matter the plot, but basically there's like this big giant mob boss that's John Goodman, because he's in everything, it seems like. And he's, go get me Chow, and he stole all my gold. It's just the dumbest plot, and it was hilarious. But my favorite cameo on Fresh Off the Boat was Michael Bolton as himself.
Oh, cool.
And the main character, I can't remember the actor's name. He was also the detective or the FBI agent who kept Ant-Man under house arrest in Ant-Man 2. But he has a steakhouse that he runs, and Michael Bolton wanted to like be a partner in it so that he could finally destroy Kenny Loggins, because Kenny Loggins has a chain of restaurants, and he's super jealous, and so he's like, we'll do this, and together we'll destroy Kenny Loggins. I think Michael Bolton, in everything I've seen him in, he plays the guy that he is in the Lonely Island music video.
Yes.
He plays that guy. I think that's who he is in real life, and it makes me really like him as a person. So
cool.
Michael Bolton seems great. That's my super rambling stuff. Maybe not all that will make the air. That's what I've been up to.
Okay.
Nothing too exciting. I don't have any video game stuff, so you guys got my random TV and movie plugs.
Right.
I enjoy listening to you talk about them, even though I haven't watched most of these. I don't consume a lot of traditional media.
I don't anymore.
I consume a lot of
mainstream
passive
media,
so TV and movies. Yeah. Reading for me is an investment that I try to read, but I complain about being not a fast reader. I know there's ways to fix that, and I could just, power through stuff and reread.
I don't know if there is. I've been reading a lot since I was 7 or younger, maybe, and I'm still not a fast reader.
But I guess maybe the way I could actually do it is dedicate solid chunks, rather than like, it took me from Saturday to today to finish Saturday's chapter of Ward. I mean, that's just because I'm reading it like in my spare minutes. If I just set aside a 45-minute window, I'm sure I could have read this whole thing, which I should probably start doing, because...
How do you feel about podcasts? I can't remember if you like them or not. I mean,
hate podcasts.
Audiobooks.
And hate everyone who makes them. No,
Audiobooks.
I'm kidding. Audiobooks I love.
Because you can convert the text of things to speech.
I've tried
Still
that.
not very good.
I did that as an experiment during the would have been 2008, maybe 2012 debates.
They have some pretty good voices out there now.
I
the
liked.
inflection is always wrong, though.
I did it with the debates for fun because I wanted just to remove all of the emotion and enunciation and this is how you feel parts and just get the raw text.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of okay.
The debate I was talking about on Intelligence Squared with the AI versus the human, one of the major feelings of the AI was that it sounded not like a human. It did not know what things to stress, what words to stress, what sentences to linger on, and that really made its argument weaker. Even though I guess it shouldn't. The facts are the facts regardless, but the way it was delivered just made it uncompelling.
There was at one of the James Randi annual conferences I went to, the amazing meetings they were called. There was
I always wanted to go to a TAM.
they were okay. Seth Fairchild, that sounds right. He was a politician, and he works for like the Secular Alliance, one of these, and he gave some 45-minute rousing speech, and at the end people were like standing and clapping, and I felt really moved, and I was like, wait a minute, this is like a political speech. This worked perfectly, and I noticed as it was happening like how weird that was. And then a few years later, Sam Harris was talking on his podcast about how like bizarre it would be to have like Martin Luther King Jr. like over for dinner and have him talk at the table like he does in front of a microphone. He's like that would be crazy unnerving, right? That's not how a human talks, but that's how you grab an audience. And so yeah, I think part of that would be lost translating stuff like this. I tried that, like I said, as an experiment with the debates in the 2000 whatevers. I don't know, doing that with something like Ward, I feel like takes a lot of stuff out of it.
Yeah, I mean, like on
might
one
be worth a
hand,
shot.
I have found that there's some pretty natural sounding readers out there that you can find.
So it's
But
not just-
but then like I also am thinking like yeah, but I wouldn't do it with Ward because I really like Ward. And it's like the things that I like.
I would
I'm
have
not
summarized like an
that
article,
invested
but
in
not
reading.
a story. Yeah.
What I generally do is just at the end of the night when I'm winding down, I'll read in bed before I go to sleep, and that generally gives me a good 30 to 40 minutes, and then I just kind of like drift out to sleep really easily. It's kind of works on two levels, gives me more reading time, and it makes falling asleep super easy.
Yeah, if I was more disciplined, I would do that instead of browse Reddit for 40 minutes before bed. So
I
And you're
deliberately.
looking at a backlit screen just
Yeah.
before bed, sir. This is bad.
it's got the blue light shift and all that stuff
I
on it.
know, but still.
And I fall asleep immediately anyway. I've never had any difficulty falling asleep. So.
Okay.
I deliberately don't read before bed, or I try not to, because I'll end up just continuing to read and not actually
if
go to
it's
sleep.
Really good, yeah. Oh my god, the Monster Borrow Cormorant I just read, so fucking good.
Oh, what's that?
It's the second novel by Seth Dickinson, so you should read the first one before you read this one. But you know what? I'm going to be writing up a review on it pretty soon. It's a fantastic piece about revenge and the limits of what you can force yourself to do before you lose humanity. And even if you're like doing it for a good cause and for an important purpose, just pushing yourself into these situations, you do it for long enough and you stop being a human that is worth to have around anymore.
Oh, that sounds like it's actually addressing a cool question.
Yeah. Seth Dickinson is fucking amazing. I don't think he self-identifies as rationalist. I call him a rationalist. He is at the very least rationalist adjacent. This is a like flintlock setting. Early gunpowder's just recently been invented, right? And the main character describes hash functions in a way that's relatable to the audience and makes sense in that setting, and just uses it as part of the narration. And I was like, this is brilliant.
I need to read this.
Yeah, it's a way of describing how humans are always alone and can never fully emotionally connect with each other because our actions are hash functions of our beliefs and emotions and things inside our head, and we can only like display like I'm crying or these are my actions, but it doesn't ever fully get from inside your head to inside the other person's head. And I'm like, this is brilliant.
I had a very long or very short, it's hard to tell, analysis of that in my own head when I was on LSD one time. And it was that exact same thing that like, man, I can never really, and you'll think you communicate it, they'll say they understand, and you think they probably do, but like you never know, and they probably don't, right? Because they can't, because it's only inside your head. But
Yeah.
they can understand a model of it, and you're trying to make that as accurate as possible. That sounds interesting.
I feel like writing, like I've actually felt like writing is basically a form of telepathy. I mean, as long as you're not doing the unreliable narrator thing.
Right.
But I think you can get pretty close to what people are thinking by reading, particularly like their blog or their journal.
Yeah, we talked about that a bit when you were reading that person on, I'm assuming it was Facebook or something. They wrote that, 3 sentences, then the next paragraphs were the GTP2. Yeah, you had the model and you were, reading their mind through what you thought were their words. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
All right, let's wrap it up.
That sounds good to me. We've got a patron to thank this week. I think I did the last one, but I don't know who's keeping score. But you know what? We still haven't done a lot of this feedback that's piling up.
Oh,
we'll
God,
get to
and
it.
we promised this was going to be a feedback episode. Our next episode will be a feedback episode. Some
time-
of it is really good, too.
Yeah.
This time we mean it.
Yeah.
Well, this time it worked out because the GTP2 news just kind of came out in the last few days. And
About a week ago.
And Alexander Wales was available to be our guest tonight. So
Yeah.
we'll have feedback on next time for sure. This week's patron is Jason Musgrave. Thanks.
I know Jason Musgrave.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, Jason Musgrave. I didn't know you listened to the show.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Maybe another Jason Musgrave, but probably not.
Right.
That's awesome. Thanks. We really appreciate it.
And thank you to all our patrons. You really make this feel more meaningful.
And everyone listens to it too. Like we were talking about.
Yeah.
This is not no work. It's not a ton, but it's a bit. And if we were literally talking to nobody, this wouldn't be worth doing. So thanks for listening.
Yeah.
If you like what you're listening to, you can leave us a rating and review on iTunes. You
Those
can
also help spread the word. Definitely.
You can plug this anywhere. If something I enjoy seeing the occasional reference to like our interview with Yudkowsky come up on the Methods of Rationality subreddit. When people are like, "Is there a word of God on when this happened?" It's like, "Oh, I know that. Like on the Bayesian Conspiracy podcast, you talked about this." I love seeing little plugs. And it's not like not just for my ego, but that's also people find out about stuff.
Yeah. But it also helps for the ego too.
Yeah. I think I was listening to We've Got Worm or Ward, and somebody said they found out about Worm from the YouTube comment section of some random video.
Huh.
And so, like, who knows? You talk about what you like wherever you want, and you might share something that you like with somebody who you never would have had a chance to talk to about it. So, that too.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
We're LGBT2 sometimes.